I made all the patterns in our Gold Bold 3-yard quilts book, but I added my own flair. Let me show you. Hi, it's Fran Morgan with Fabric Café. Last year, I challenged myself to make all of the patterns from our Gold Bold with 3-yard quilts book. I didn't do them all just with 3 yards though. I changed things up. I used fat quarters and layer cakes and scraps, and I changed fabric placements around, you name it. So today, we're gonna step through what I did, and I'm gonna show you some great fabrics. Let's check out the first quilt. Now this is the modern art quilt, and whenever I started looking at the pattern to make this, I thought, this is the perfect quilt to use scraps, because it has all of these places right in here that I can vary the fabric. I kind of kept them in different tones, but varied them because, of course, one of them is bordered, one of them is bordered on 2 sides, and it kind of gave me a place to use smaller scraps and smaller pieces. And then on the border, so for the number 3 fabric, I also used scraps, so I could use some of my strip scraps, which was great. So here you can see that it's more of a turquoise blue. This is more of a green kind of turquoise jade color. And as you can see here, I used more of the green, but then down here, I arranged it so that I used some other blue that I had. So I kind of just pulled everything together, and really, I think it worked perfect using scraps. Now I did kind of keep them all in the same color family that you can see here so that they all blend really well, and I like that. I also used this scrap on the border. I chose that one because I really like that it has multiple colors. It pulls all of these colors into the border, but then I also sprinkled it in on some of the blocks like there and here. It just kind of, I think, helped tie it together and unified it. So this one was really, really fun to do. Let's get it on the table. I'll step through the process a little bit more. So I actually went through my stash and I pulled them all out. You know, it makes this huge mess, but you know, you just go with it. And I start kind of moving them around and putting them in groups of colors. I originally had a lot of purple with this, and I thought, okay, it would be really cool to maybe use the number 3 fabric here with the purple and just kind of put it in there. But I started doing some test blocks, and it didn't really give that serene, calm feeling that I was wanting with the quilt. So I ended up doing some more test blocks and putting the colors together that I did. Now, what I do think worked was this blue, this turquoise blue here. Now, I didn't have enough scraps of this green, so I did incorporate this, and I lined it up just so that it went together. I think it worked. I think the other thing that I did is I had a nice size scrap of this border fabric, and this border fabric had a lot of the jade greens in it, and it had the other colors. So I thought that it kind of brought it all together and just kind of unified it. So, you know, just with moving things around, doing some test blocks, it really worked. So then I also decided that I needed to use a very basic cream for the background, just to help all of the color pop off. And I think it gives the quilt some unity, which I think is really important. Even though it's a beautiful scrap quilt, you still want it to be, you know, unified and pleasing. And I think the background, keeping it consistent, really made a difference. So then I had to start making these blocks. So whenever I started doing this, the pattern calls for strip piecing, where you cut long strips of fabric and you sew them on their long edges. And because I'm using scraps, I didn't have full width of fabric. So what I did is I actually cut the squares out to size and then just sewed my number 3 strips on them as if I was strip piecing, but I just had squares sewing them on there instead. I think it really worked, and it really wasn't hard to do because really none of these were directional that was going to cause a problem. It was pretty easy to pull together. Because I did that, and I did some little test blocks, I ended up having quite a few of these little samples of blocks left over. So let me show you what I did. I'm gonna pull it to the backside here, and you can see I didn't want those to go to waste. So I just sewed them together, rotating them, and just put a little extra strip here and then sewed them smack in the middle of my backing. And that way I could use it. And if it gets turned over on the bed or in the chair, you get a little peekaboo of specialness, which I really, really, really like. I think this turned out great. It is definitely one of my favorites that I've done. One more thing that I think turned out really great is because I have a white background, we used a green thread on the long arm, which I think helps the background really pop and you can really see it. So I think that's cool. I like it whenever there's a white background, we can use a colored thread for the long arm. And our long armer, Lucinda, always does such a great job recommending that, and I really appreciate it. So it's very cool. Okay, now if you would like to do the modern art quilt from Go Bold, I have some great fabric here that kind of has the similar feel of my scrap quilt. By all means, if you want to do a scrap quilt, have fun, send me a picture because I want to see, okay? We listen at fabriccafe.com. But if you like the traditional 3-yard and you want a similar feel, I think this works really well. We have a focus fabric here that has the blues and the greens, just little touches of purple in it, lots of movement similar to some of these fabrics here. And this will be the focus fabric and it'll go in all of these places, all these little blocks here, very fun. Then we have a number 2 that is just a nice off-white textural. It's got just a little bit of a dot to it. That's gonna be your background. Because remember, I really like the off-white background on this to really help it pop. For our number 3, we've got a very similar jade green. The jade green is gonna go here. This is our number 3 fabric. That's gonna give you lots of contrast. It's gonna help your eye travel across the quilt, which is kind of cool because this one does have a lot of that movement and I think it really works. So like this jade green with this, is it not scrumptious? It's just so, so pretty. Such a beautiful color palette. So let's take a look at the image of this made up in this great fabric. I love the focus fabric on this and I love that it's got the movement very similar to some of the scraps that I used in mine. Has lots of colors. It has the turquoise blues, the jade greens, just little hints of purple in it. And I really like the way it floats across the surface. And I love that dark green, how whenever it goes in, that number 3 fabric, creating that kind of diagonal movement is so wonderful. And it really adds so much interest and boldness to this quilt. Really, really think it turned out great. Now let me get you the kit information on this kit. It is called Lagoon Brushstrokes, and it is the modern art pattern from the Go Bold with 3-Yard Quilts book. Now I really went bold with the Starstruck pattern. I used these really bright colors. Now whenever I started this pattern, the number 1 thing I wanted to do was use this green fabric. And I wanted it to be a background because I wanted the stars to really pop off of it. In doing so, what I had to do is flip-flop my focus and my number 2 fabric. So in reality, the green is my focus, and this multicolor, which is an ombre, became my number 2 fabric. This is the placement in the pattern. Now, I chose the black because I wanted the points of these stars and pinwheels to really pop off of this green and this ombre. I really needed that super strong contrast. So I did that so that you could really, really see them. Now, as I mentioned, I flip-flopped my 1 and 2 positions. So the green is the number 1 fabric. This ombre multicolor here is my number 2 fabric, which is kind of cool the way it's placed. And it just shows you that you can move those fabric positions around so easily and it can work. All right, now, because this was an ombre, it was very important to me to lay my blocks out before I sewed my rows together. And the reason why I wanted to do that is because some of the pieces had darker parts of the ombre, then it went kind of a medium tone here, and then it went much, much lighter down here. So I kind of made all the light blocks fall at the bottom, the mediums in the middle, and the darks at the top. And that way it kind of looks like there's light shining on it from a certain direction, which I really like. So let's get this Starstruck pattern up on the table and talk some more about it. First, the Starstruck pattern is a 1 block, which is awesome. So I want to just show you really quick this block because it's one of those kind of little tricky things that you're going, what? So it is a really, really easy block to make, and it is a little unusual. So you're gonna make your blocks and you're not gonna realize that once you get them all put together and rotated and sewn together, it makes this amazing star quilt. So here is the block. So we have a unit here. I'm gonna bring this in so that you can see it. So this unit here is basically a square and a half square triangle and a square and a half square triangle. And it makes 1/4 of our big star. We're gonna sew just a rectangle right here on the top or bottom, whatever it is that you're working on there. Then we're gonna sew a strip next to that. And then we're gonna sew one more unit to the side of that. It's a long rectangle and a half square triangle. This triangle actually is 1/4 of the pinwheel, which is kind of cool. This is a really easy block to do, and it's gonna go together beautifully. I'm looking at this pattern, okay? And I first say, wow, it's a one block. This is gonna go together easy. I'm always in love with them because once you kind of get going making it, it makes it really efficient. And you realize, oh, no, it goes this way because I've done it that way 10 other times, and it's like this, and you know exactly where everything's placed. Love that. The fabric 1 was in this placement where the green is, and the fabric 2 was the center of the star. And I decided that I really would prefer all of the color to be in the center of the big star because I just thought it would show all the color off better. So I decided to flip-flop my fabric 1 and 2 positions and put my green in number 1 and my multicolor in number 2. And then I put the black in number 3. Now, when you do this, sometimes your brain kind of does a little funny trick, and I know it did whenever I was working with it. I kept looking at this multicolored fabric, which is so gorgeous, but I kept wanting to make it be the number 1. So I just basically set them aside, put a label on it, and I went to the pattern, and I said, okay, let's cut all of fabric number 1, okay? My fabric number 1 was green. So I just went and I cut it all out and I labeled it appropriately. This is gonna be this piece, this is this piece, and labeled it fabric 1. That way I didn't get confused. Put it away, then I went back and I got my fabric number 2, which in my case was this beautiful multicolor. So then I went and I cut all of those pieces from the instructions and labeled them and got them all ready to go so that I knew that I wasn't gonna get confused when I started sewing because my brain wanted to go the other way. So then fabric number 3 was black and it worked perfectly. My multicolored fabric, which is technically my number 2 fabric, it is an ombre fabric. So one of the things that I really wanted to do was make all of my blocks and then lay it out on the table or wall, whatever you have in your area, so that I can look at the position of the lights and the darks. So there's some blocks that had more darker areas of the fabric and some blocks that had a little bit lighter area of the fabric. I wanted to group the light area blocks together and then group the darkers together so that it had that flow, you know, kind of like I mentioned at the quilt where it looked like the light was shining from a certain direction. So I prefer laying it out like that so I can kind of move things around and kind of get it to where it really looks special for me. So that's kind of how I did it. All right, it was really a lot of fun. I really think that switching my position 2 and 1 and 2 with the fabrics the way I did worked beautifully. Now, I have some fabric here that is also going to be amazing in this quilt. I love it. We have this kind of batik stripe here with lots of different colors. Now I'm gonna just flip this over a little bit so that you can see that this fabric goes to the blues, the greens, the pinks, the yellows. So, so gorgeous. This will be our fabric number 1, and it's gonna go where the green is because it's fabric number 1 on my quilt. It's gonna look amazing. And I love the way that this fabric is going to get all of those different colors in different blocks on this quilt. I think it's gonna be really cool. Now our fabric number 2 is the green, and it's the same green that I use. We were able to find it, I love that. And it is our fabric 2. It is gonna go everywhere the multicolor is on my quilt. And then of course our black with some fun little bubbly texture there. It's going to go everywhere you see the black here. So it is going to be gorgeous. Let's check out an image. Look at this. Is this not so beautiful? I mean, it is so reminiscent of what I did, and the fabric is so cool. And I love the way all of the colors show up in different places from that focus fabric, and that green just pops. It is gorgeous. Now, as you're looking at this, I want to mention something else that I kind of forgot to mention. I don't want to leave you until I say this. I alternated my borders here. I put my number 3 as the border 1 and my number 2 as my border 2. Just flip-flopped it. You have fun with it. You put them wherever you want to do. But on this quilt, it looks great this way, and I think it looks great the way I did it too. So get creative. I really enjoy it. All right, this kit is called Rainbow Rhythm. It is the Starstruck pattern from the Go Bold with 3-Yard Quilts book. Now this is Amore, and you know, this is such a fun pattern. I have thought of so many different ways that this can be made, but I made mine with scraps, a layer cake, and a jelly roll. Now I didn't use all of the layer cake and I didn't use all of the jelly roll, but I used quite a bit, and I think it really came out great. So let me point out what I did. First, on the focus position where the heart is here, I used layer cakes and cut them up to make each of the hearts. And as you can see, they're all different colors, and I think it's just so much fun like that. I really like the multicolor. Now, another place where I have my focus fabric is on the border here. Now, I used a combination of layer cake strips that I just cut and the jelly roll strips that I cut to size so that it all worked in different places. I just think it turned out cool. Now, I did do one major change. I used my number 2 fabric in the background here. I used scraps, and all of these scraps are different. They're kind of an off-white cream, but I was able to clean out my stash of all those cream fabrics that I had, and I didn't quite have enough to make a whole quilt, so I just varied them in every block. Now, I put the cream in the center where the number 3 fabric typically goes. And I did that because I wanted this kind of grid work to really pop off the quilt. I thought it just added a new dimension to the whole thing, and I just used different ones. So this is a different cream than this, which is a different cream from that, which is a different cream from that, and it just worked. So I was able to use lots of different sizes of scraps. Now there's one more thing I want to point out. On my border, I actually pieced the border using jelly rolls. So if you kind of look down around it here, you can see that the fabric's changed. I just sewed my jelly rolls end to end and sewed them on the border, and it worked perfectly. And I was able to use up some of those jelly roll strips, which I really needed. All right, well, let's go to the table, check out some fabulous fabric, and talk some more about this. I realized that on the hearts, I could make one heart out of the one square, the one layer cake square, because like I could cut the square. So whenever you do half square triangles, you cut one square and you put it with your number 2 fabric, and then you cut it and it makes 2 half square triangles. So it made the bottom of this, which was perfect. And then 2 more squares here to make the top of our heart. And then I just used one layer cake for each heart, which worked out great. I thought it just turned out so cute. And then for the borders here, I used some little edges of the 10-inch layer cake piece to do these, as well as some jelly roll strips that I cut down and just did the block borders. And I think it kind of gave it a really neat kind of lattice look. So I wanted to do a really bold backing with this. So I had this fabric. Wow, so much movement. And it's pink, and I thought it was perfect for the Amore pattern. Has little touches of blues. Just lots of fun, you know, you just got to have fun every once in a while. And I thought this worked so well. And I also love when I sent it to the long arm, she actually put blue thread in her bobbin. but she put pink thread on her top thread. And so it's pink on the top and blue on the bottom. I thought it was so cool. And anytime you have a quilt that has a little bit more off-white or cream on it like this one does, I think the colored thread in the quilting is just amazing. I really, really like it. So it's very fun. So layer cakes, scraps, all kinds of things. You can make a beautiful quilt. Or you can get 3 yards of fabric like I'm about to show you and make a beautiful quilt. So let's step through that. So for our focus fabric, we have this beautiful pink, large floral. Has little touches of green, some purple on this. This is going to be in our focus position, which is our heart here. And what I really love about this fabric for our hearts is because it's a big print, I think you're going to get different touches of color in different hearts, which I think is really cool. And then for our number 2 fabric, we have a nice cream with a little speckle on it that is going to be in the background of your hearts here. Now remember, I used a cream for my number 3. So for this kit, our number 3 is this fun, big kind of abstract polka dot. It's got some pinks, some oranges, some reds in it, and it's going to go in the center of these blocks here. It's going to look really fun and really cool. Is this not great? I love the Amore pattern in pinks. I just think it's appropriate. I think it is so cute and it's so fun. Now it looks great in all kinds of fabrics, but this is really, really sweet. I think the hearts really pop on this because it picks up a little bit of the purple colors in that focus fabric, and that number 2, that light background, really helps them come forward. So much fun, really great. This particular kit is called Bold Botanicals, and we have put it in our Amore pattern from Go Bold with 3-yard quilts. Now on this 3-yard quilt, I used 3 yards, which is kind of cool because so many of the other ones I scrapped it up. But what I did do on this is I used a very highly textured fabric that has lots of movement in it, lots of color variation. And so what I have here is my fabric 1. Here has like a variation of creams and blues and golds. And so every piece that I cut, it almost looks like it's a different fabric, but it's not. It's just really highly textured. Then for my number 2, I just used kind of a cream texture that has some light golds and some beiges and some creams in there, acted as a nice background. And then for my number 3, I have one that's got more blacks and darker browns in it with the cream. And I think it all worked. It all blended together. Now my goal whenever I made this quilt was to create a quilt for my home that I can use in my TV room that wasn't too feminine. Because my husband lives there too. So I wanted something that he would really enjoy that had a little bit more masculine feel to it. And I think it just turned out gorgeous. So love the way it turned out. Let's go check out some more fabric. Now through this whole process of challenging myself to make all 8 quilts from Go Bold, I came upon this fabric in my stash. And I love this kind of marbly look that has multiple colors and it's very highly textured. So first thing I thought is, this would be perfect for my TV room because we have a little separate room that we use for our TV, and it's shared, of course, by me and my husband, and of course my kitty Ollie. So I didn't want to make a quilt for that room that was too masculine, too feminine, but something that really matched the decor. And this worked perfectly. I think it has a really elegant touch to it, and I think the Chateau pattern was perfect for it. Now you can see that all this movement is in this quilt and it's really great. And this looks like it's a really complicated quilt, but actually it's a 1 block and it's very, very simple. So let me show you the block so that you can see what I mean. It's another one, it's kind of like Starstruck where it's like, what? That's the block? It is, and it's so simple. So we actually have 4 units that make up the block. So I'm going to move the cropping tool over. These are the outer border. I'm going to move it over so that you can see that we have a half square triangle here. We have a half square triangle here that is bordered on 2 sides. So that's 1/2 of the block. I'm going to move this over and you can see that we have a larger half square triangle here and then a smaller half square triangle here that is bordered on 2 sides. And then you put them together to create this one block. Now, you're going to take these and turn them so that they come together and create the pinwheels and the really fun stars and the great movement in the quilt. And I think it turned out great. I love the fabric choices. Not a place I would normally go, but the high texture on it is great. And it looks great in our TV room. And it is now not my quilt. My kitty, Ollie, has decided that this is his quilt, and he sits on it almost daily, either in my lap or on the couch. He curls up on it if I leave it on the couch, which I do. He is on it and he loves it. So it's kind of fun that he's kind of found the special one just for him. So we know his taste. He has a very refined taste. But this was really a fun one to do. I love that it was a one block, and I love that it worked so well in these highly textured fabrics that matches my decor perfectly. So I wanted to give you an option to do something very, very similar. So this kit is gorgeous, and I love the way that we were able to pick up very similar colors with the blues and the grays and the black. So our focus fabric is this amazing blue that has darker and lighter blues, little touches of green and little touches of like a jade green in here too. This is going to go everywhere you see the more blue gold fabric in this quilt here, and a little on the border. I think it's going to work really well. Then for our number 2, some more yummy texture. I love all these textures. We have kind of a putty color that has the browns, the grays, the creams, some speckles, some movement in it. This will be our number 2. It's going to go in the background here, everywhere you see the cream. And then for our number 3, we have this really yummy, so much color in it and so much depth in this fabric. We have some dark brown, some black, a little bit of dark blue, lots of colors, and it really has a lot of dimension and movement, which I think is just gorgeous. That is going to border here. Now, remember, this is a one block, so this all kind of comes together to create this. And a little on the binding, I think it's superb. Let me show you an image. Wow, is this not beautiful? Now, if I would have had this fabric whenever I made this quilt, I might have done it out of this fabric, because I think this just turned out great. It still has all that texture, all that movement. I love the way the pinwheels just come together and that diagonal movement with the pattern, and the way the fabrics are placed work so well. I love that cream putty in the background too. It's just so yummy. So the kit information on this one, it is called Stormy Slate. This is our Chateau pattern from the book Go Bold. Now, I couldn't show all of my quilts from the book today, but don't worry. We're going to show you the rest on Thursday. So make sure you like and subscribe, hit that notification bell so that you don't miss seeing the other quilts and how I changed them up. If you would like to see all of the patterns in this book and even more combinations, be sure to watch the video that pops up. Happy quilting!